We've been way too topical recently, talking about all these new and relevant things. It's about time we return to oddball left field topics, like how if you really think about it, Yamcha and Krillin could be the same person, and barely any of Dragon Ball would change. Wow, that's a bold claim. But hopefully I can present to you a pretty compelling argument throughout this video. I can't remember where I saw this idea, but I recently read a post where someone said this, and I couldn't get it out of my head. Is that really true? Could Krillin and Yamcha just be one character? Well, let's talk about it. So Yamcha and Krillin are both pretty well-liked characters in the overall Dragon Ball ethos, but when you really think about it, they served very similar roles in the story. They're both kind of the straight man to our quite odd protagonist. You could even argue they're a bit of an audience surrogate, someone reading the story can project themselves onto, generally reacting to events in a similar manner to the audience. They're portrayed as a secondary strong character to support Son Goku, but never actually on Goku's level, and they're both schemers, generally trying to outwit their opponents. And most importantly, if you really think about it, Krillin and Yamcha are essentially never relevant during the story at the same time. Basically every Yamcha moment happens while Krillin isn't present, and every Krillin moment happens while Yamcha isn't there. So it's actually very easy to imagine a version of Dragon Ball where they're just essentially one character. A general common complaint about Dragon Ball is how a lot of the characters end up getting sidelined in favor of the new characters. I definitely think this sometimes gets overblown as a complaint for the series, since you only have so much screen time to go around. For Yamcha to get more attention during Dragon Ball Z, that generally means we'd have to sacrifice some of Vegeta or Piccolo's screen time. There's a trade-off for everything you do when writing a story, and generally, I think really focusing on and letting a select few characters shine is better than having an entire crew of dim bulbs. With the idea that less is more in mind, this can be pretty well exemplified with Yamcha and Krillin, because while Yamcha falls off drastically even in early Dragon Ball, Krillin really prospers as a background support character for essentially the entire original manga. But if you really think about it, Krillin kinda stole Yamcha's position in the story, like his exact position. It's weird how often we make up an excuse for why Yamcha isn't there for Krillin to show up instead. Honestly, if Toriyama didn't keep coming up with reasons to keep Yamcha out of the story, and he was a more prominent character, he probably wouldn't have had to break up with Bulma. But maybe that's also part of the reason for Yamcha's fall off. Toriyama has said he's not very good at writing romance, and it's possible he was hesitant to include Yamcha in the later part of the story because he didn't want to have to actually write the dynamic of a romantically involved couple. It's something to think about for sure. Anyways, let's get into the meat of this video. I'm essentially going to go through the entire story of Dragon Ball, but we're just going to fuse Yamcha and Krillin together to show just how easy it would have been. So obviously, for this premise to work, we basically have to just delete Krillin and replace him with Yamcha, since Yamcha was obviously introduced first. But I hope people don't take this as me hating on Krillin. He's definitely one of my favorite characters. It just generally makes more sense to do it this way. The spirit of Krillin will live on from within Yamcha in this what if. And as you'll see, this Krillcha, Yamlin, let's stick to Yamcha, will end up being more Krillin than Yamcha by the end of this story. Pretty obviously, since Krillin just gets a lot more screen time than Yamcha. Our first what if diverges right around the end of the first arc, where instead of the crew going their separate ways, Yamcha learns that Goku is planning to go train with Master Roshi, and being a martial artist enthusiast himself, is interested in going too. He inquires with Bulma, and she says she still has like a month of vacation time left, so the crew heads over to Roshi's island together. You could also do some kind of a comedy bit, where Yamcha and Bulma have a fight like a day into their relationship, where Yamcha leaves to train with Goku. But in the spirit of condensing our cast down, I want to keep Bulma around. Instead of introducing a new girl who will literally only ever exist for the sake of gags, we can just give Bulma more screen time. Launch is honestly an even more egregious example of Dragon Ball abandoning old characters, so just giving Bulma more screen time makes a lot of sense. This also means Puar and Oolong would be around, but don't think about that. And I could definitely see Toriyama doing all of this in the main story, since he was never shy to do comedy scenes between Bulma and Roshi. This of course means we're just cutting out the launch side quest entirely, but we can replace it with any manner of other comedic shenanigans. One bit that I think works exceptionally well here is the one where Krillin talks about how martial artists all shave their head, with Roshi telling them he's just bald. We could insert Yamcha into this gag, but have him shave his head for it, with some additional bits with Bulma being mad at him for ruining his hair. Yamcha actually ended up cutting his hair between this arc and the first tournament anyway, so we could use his hair regrowing to literally show the progression of time during their training. Okay, let's skip ahead a bit. During the first tournament, we get our next Krillin-specific scene, where Krillin meets his past bullies. We never really fleshed out Yamcha's backstory in the main series. We know he was abandoned in current times, but he was also a big martial arts nerd, recognizing Son Gohan by name, and even knowing that the Noibo was Gohan's signature weapon. So it's pretty easy to change up these bullies. Just have them come from the Wolf-style martial arts school, instead of the Orin Temple. You might argue this is out of character for Yamcha, but I really don't think it's that weird. Krillin was never portrayed as insecure about his strength before this scene either. This does of course bring us to Yamcha's actual reappearance in the main story, so what are we going to do about this? This is the first time Yamcha and Krillin have actually existed at the same time. Well, the thing is, they still never really interact, or even do stuff at the same time. Basically, we need to replace Yamcha in the tournament with someone else. Kind of like how Roshi fought Manwolf in the 22nd tournament, we can just introduce a new character for Jackie Chun to have a gag fight against. Alternatively, Yamcha does in fact have a nose, so how will he beat Bacterian? Well, Bacterian essentially only exists for the sake of the gag about Krillin having no nose, so in a hypothetical non-Krillin version of the story, we would just get some other character here, more tailored to Yamcha. Then, after the prelims, we can just get the canon Krillin vs Jackie Chun fight, but with Yamcha. That then leads into the Red Ribbon Army saga, where Goku goes off on his own for a while, eventually returning to find Bulma to fix his radar. Once he arrives, instead of making an excuse as to why Yamcha isn't there so we have room for Krillin, Yamcha could just go on the pirate quest. Within said quest, and a few other times, we get jokes about Bulma's infidelity, and those could be even funnier with Yamcha actually present, since Yamcha would of course be offended by Bulma hitting on Blue. And these are of course also setups for the eventual shift. After that, canon Yamcha returns, joining the gang to support Goku's assault on the Red Ribbon Army, only to learn Goku didn't need them. This is once again a scene where both Krillin and Yamcha are present, but they don't really converse with each other at all. That is until the Fortune Teller Baba arc, where we once again hit a minor snag, because they're both members of Goku's fighting team here. The thing is, Krillin just kinda gets low-diffed by a gag opponent. It's not very hard to cut him out. We can just say Yamcha is the one losing to the vampire, only for Upa to do his bit that confirms Jesus Christ is canon to the Dragon Ball world from the sidelines, saving Yamcha and letting him press on, only to once again almost lose, only being saved by yet another outside gag support. Now originally it's Krillin who comes up with this idea to help Yamcha beat the Invisible Man, but we could just have Oolong be there to do it instead, since it's honestly weird he wasn't there in canon in the first place, being the only member of the OG gang not present during this arc. Anyways, Yamcha ends up losing to the Mummy, and that takes us to the next time skip, where canon Yamcha joins Krillin under Master Roshi. But in our case, the status quo would essentially just stay the same. You might say in the absence of an additional student, Goku would spend the time skip with Roshi, but since Goku was already stronger than Roshi here, Roshi was probably always going to try and send Goku to train on his own, while Yamcha still has some room for improvement. And while Yamcha continues to train, I have my own grind I've been working towards. We're nearing the 30k milestone, and I'd really appreciate you lending me a bit of your energy to keep us on track. Now for the 22nd tournament, where we have another decision to make. Both Yamcha and Krillin get somewhat important fights here, so we have to choose between Yamcha losing to Ten Shinhan versus Krillin's fights against Chaozu and Goku. Both are pretty important, and I know either way some people will be upset with what I choose, but ultimately I think Yamcha versus Ten Shinhan is the more replaceable fight. The purpose of that fight is basically to set up Ten Shinhan as a brutal antagonist. The thing is, it's just easier to replace Yamcha with someone like Nam, an alternative character who Goku also shares a bond with, so we can still have his standoff with Ten Shinhan after the fight. Alternatively, Krillin vs Chaozu plays into the Crane School vs Turtle School narrative, and the Goku vs Krillin fight sets up just how next level Goku has become before the big final fight against Ten Shinhan. While Ten Shinhan vs Yamcha is a personal favorite of mine, it's ultimately just way easier to replace on a narrative level. And of course, as you know, right after this, Krillin dies, which in our case would be Yamcha. And this is just a fun little thing to throw in, but Yamcha randomly gains scars during the time skip between Piccolo Daimao and the 23rd tournament, which was always really strange, considering Yamcha was like the 4th strongest guy on the planet during that time. So how does he get those scars? Well, that's never answered in canon, but here we can say his scars are from his death at the hands of Tambourine. The Piccolo arc is a pretty strong supporter for this idea to fuse Krillin and Yamcha together, since in canon, Yamcha is already out of commission the entire arc thanks to his broken leg. Though, funny side tangent, in canon, by the end of the arc, Toriyama briefly forgets Yamcha's leg was supposed to be broken, having him appear seemingly fully healed, only to regain his casting crutch a few chapters later. Alright, that brings us to the 23rd. This one is genuinely super easy. Once again, we just have Yamcha take Krillin's place during the tournament. Who will replace Yamcha, you ask? Well, it's literally already in the story. In the absence of an additional finalist, Yajirobe could just make it to the finals. We already saw Kami take down Yajirobe in the preliminaries, so we could just promote that fight to the main tournament, and maybe extend it a bit, with it serving the exact same purpose the original fight with Yamcha had, with the added benefit that Yajirobe gets more screen time. But yeah, our Krillin-Yamcha hybrid gets to fight Piccolo, and maybe we could even add in the scene where Yamcha gets to use his Sokyudan technique. And with that, we've made it to Dragon Ball Z. Here we see Krillin at Kame House, but Yamcha is nowhere to be seen, since Bulma is mad at him and didn't tell him about the meetup. Our version would obviously include Yamcha though, so we can include some bit about them fighting, only for it to be revealed later in the scene that they're fighting over something super petty. Alright, time for the battle with the Saiyans, and what is essentially the only time in the entire series where Krillin and Yamcha meaningfully interact with each other on screen. That being how Yamcha steps up to fight instead of Krillin, since Krillin can't be brought back to life with the Dragon Balls. Due to that, this is the only part of the video where I have to functionally change the story, as it just doesn't work without Yamcha and Krillin together. In the original canon, at this point, things looked pretty good for our heroes. Ten Shinhan low-diffs his Saibaman, and then Yamcha also low-diffs his. But that's when the rug is pulled out from under us, with the Saibaman blowing itself up, taking Yamcha along with it. This is the point where things just keep going downhill, with Ten Shinhan, Chaozu, and Piccolo following soon after. So in our version, we're just going to push the narrative downturn back a bit. In our version, we'll just give our boy a clean win, and like Yamcha wanted to do in canon, we'll give him a cool moment where he gets to take out all of the remaining Saibamen at once. Now our spirits are even higher. These Saibamen, who were all equal to Raditz, were light work for our gang. We might really have a chance. And that is of course when Nappa lays down the hammer, and the plot realigns. I won't lie to you though, this is a bit of a downgrade from the original version, but ultimately it still works and gets us to the same place. We do end up losing out on the scene where Bulma breaks down over Yamcha's death, but regardless, things are still pretty depressing. After that, nothing else in the Saiyan saga really needs to change, so we head to Namek. And I think it would be kind of fun if the Namek crew is essentially the cast of the first arc, but with Gohan replacing his father. It's worth remembering that our crew didn't originally think Namek was going to be so dangerous, so it's not that weird for some of our weaker characters to go with them, just cuz. They would just end up joining Bulma while she hides in a cave the entire arc regardless. But all that is just a fun idea. Namek also functionally doesn't change at all. Now, unlike the Saiyan saga where this idea kind of makes the story a bit worse, the Android saga is where it shines, and I'd say actually improves the original, because like in the original, Bulma cheats on Yamcha for Vegeta. And yes, I know what I said. Yes, in the original manga, Trunks says that Yamcha was unfaithful, but keep in mind, that's just what Bulma told him, and it's not like she would tell her son that she was the cheater. Beyond that, it's far more in character for Bulma to cheat, with there being two separate jokes about how Bulma is willing to cheat on Yamcha earlier in the manga. Alternatively, cheating is super out of character for Yamcha. With all of that in mind, I think Bulma being the one who cheated is a lot more likely, regardless of any jokes Toriyama made about it in interviews after the manga ended, as external interviews aren't actually part of the story. But anyways, none of that really matters here, I just wanted to complain about it. The important thing is that Yamcha and Bulma break up. In many ways, it feels like Yamcha really got thrown in the trash from this point onward. He got cucked by Vegeta, and as soon as the villain shows up, he gets impaled. After that, he's essentially downgraded to a relevant background character like Oolong and Puar. It's honestly just sad. Even more so when you consider Yamcha's dream was to get married, something he still hasn't accomplished years later in either GT or Super. Puar is a boy, by the way, if you didn't know. All of that is why Krillin and Yamcha being one person works out pretty well here, because in the absence of a satisfying conclusion for Yamcha, Krillin gets an excellent arc to end off his character in his relationship with Android 18. In fact, that arc works even better for Yamcha, since he's fresh off his breakup with Bulma. It would be really nice to see him finally in a happy relationship where he's not constantly being slandered behind his back. And like I said, his literal dream was to get married. Sadly, Toriyama did my man Yamcha pretty dirty, essentially replacing him with another guy extremely early into the story. Yamcha kind of just being left out to dry always leaves a bad taste in my mouth, so it's fun to think what could have been. Yamcha and Krillin are extremely similar characters, and they generally serve the same purpose. There's really only room for one half comedic, half serious best friend type character, but I'm curious if you disagree. Maybe I forgot something that really throws a wrench into my idea here. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it in the comments section. On that, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.